Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3 of the Chore Coat Quilt Along. I'm so happy you're here. If you're just joining us, I would recommend going back and watching the prep week video and videos for week 1 and 2 to catch you up to where we are now, because this is a really exciting week. It's the one where your coat finally starts to look like a coat. If you've made it this far, you've already done a huge amount of work and you should feel really proud of yourself. Let's start with a quick recap. So last week we attached the cuffs to our sleeves and we assembled the body of our coat. Today we're finishing the main construction. We're constructing the collar and attaching it to the coat. We're putting in the sleeves and we're adding the pockets, which have a bias binding around them. So I will have a video walking you through how to make a bias binding and how to attach it to your pocket. So by the end of this week, your coat will be almost fully constructed, which is a huge milestone. Let's begin with the collar. You're going to take your collar sections and your interfacing. You're going to attach your interfacing and sew your collar together. Then you're going to attach your collar to the coat. This is probably the most challenging step of this pattern, just because you're dealing with a lot of layers of fabric along a curve. I'm going to have a video walking you through the collar assembly and attaching it to your coat so you can watch me do it step by step. You'll be amazed how much it starts to look like a real coat with the collar in place. The keys are going to be to use your clips to sew slowly around the curve and to trust the process. So slowly lengthen your stitch length and let the fabric naturally fall around the curve. So next we're attaching the sleeves. Once again, we're sewing along a curve, so I encourage you to use lots of clips to hold it in place and slowly make your way around the curve without pulling the upper or the lower fabric too tautly. Once the sleeve is attached, think about how you plan to finish your final seams. In the previous video, we talked about a couple options for finishing with a bias binding, or my preference is to press your seams open and stitch the raw edges down and then trim the excess after that. Personally, I think that is the best way to get a smooth finish, especially for your sleeves. Now is the time to stitch those sleeve seams down rather than once you've closed them. So after both sleeves are attached, this is a great time to try on the coat. Even if it's not completely finished, putting it on is very exciting and motivating. Now we are moving on to the pockets. The pockets are one of my favorite parts because they really make the pattern feel personal and practical. Before attaching them to the coat, we're going to be putting on the bias binding. Now, if you haven't done bias binding before, it can feel a little tricky, but I'm going to have a video walking you through exactly how to make it and how to attach it to the curved edges of your pocket. This is a great opportunity to add some fun contrast to your coat. I like to use a contrasting fabric because it really makes the pockets pop off of the coat. Once you have your bias binding attached, we're going to stitch the pockets in place on our front panels. Use pins to put the pockets where you want them to be. And then I recommend trying on the coat before you've attached the pockets, looking in the mirror to make sure that they're at the right height. Since these pockets, you put your hands in from the top, you don't want them so high that it's uncomfortable. But be aware that we are finishing the bottom of our coat with a turn under hem. So you don't want to put your pockets too low where it'll interfere with that final finishing touch. Recap of a couple potential pitfalls you might run into this week. Number one, when attaching the collar, you are working with a lot of layers of fabric, and that bulk can cause some frustration. I recommend after you attach the collar, go back through and trim some of the bulk off of that seam before you turn it under and top stitch it down. The second area of challenge this week is that bias binding. Bias binding can be a little challenging if it's your first time doing it, so give yourself some grace and don't worry if it's not perfectly straight. I want to take a final moment to just say how impressive it is that you took a flat dimensionless quilt and you have turned it into a garment, a wearable coat. Finally, the giveaway. So last week's giveaway winner is going to be named in the description of this video. So go check it out. See if maybe you won the clapper, the tailor's clapper from last week. Last week, the prompt was to leave a YouTube comment. And this week, I'm going to be giving away some fun fabric of mine. This is my Let's Wander collection with Riley Blake. And it's actually a couple of the fabrics that I used in my coat. I love this collection so much. And I'm going to give a couple yards away to you guys. All you need to do to enter is comment on this video one new skill that you have learned through this quilt along. If you're an experienced sewist and all of these skills are familiar to you, comment one skill that you were excited to revisit that maybe you haven't done in a while. So I look forward to reading all of the comments and hearing what you say, and one of you will be chosen as a winner for some of this fabric. Thank you guys for being here. I cannot wait to see your coats come together. I will meet you back here next week for our final week, week 4, where we finish up our coat. Best of luck in putting all the final pieces together and happy sewing!